All right. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some new ones as well. If I have not met you yet, I'm Adam Jahr. I'm founder of Vue Mastery. We are an education platform devoted to Vue developers, helping them upskill and learn everything they need to succeed and stay relevant in their career field. Since we started a little over 7 years ago, we've been grateful to have reached millions of developers worldwide, and we've done that with our content, and along the way, we've really witnessed the power of developer education. And done well, this can transform careers, it can unify teams under a shared vision, accelerate adoption, and also support open source by education companies like ourselves and Vue School contributing some of our revenue back into the technologies that we're teaching. So creating that loop of support of open source through teaching open source. And usually at conferences, I present a live version of one of our courses and do a rather technical talk. I usually am using animations, taking complex clouded concepts and distilling them into something a little more graspable, into nuggets of knowledge. But today I actually want to take a step back and share my approach for what it takes to actually create that kind of content and create content that can reach developers and earn their trust by really adding immediate value to their lives and helping improve their lives. Because as we share knowledge, we can shine a light that illuminates a path, and like all great paths, they lead to mastery. So I get that probably many of you in here are not directly involved in developer education, but I do want to provide some context around how effective technical content can be leveraged in a bunch of ways. So maybe you work on an open source project, you want to accelerate adoption of that. Maybe you're trying to scale your open source or your SaaS project. Maybe you're in DevRel and want to excel and hit your KPIs. Or maybe you're creating your own brand and you want to create content, be on YouTube, etc., and have a nice personal brand in the space through that content development. Or you might just be working as an engineer on a team, and you might not quite fully feel plugged into the greater scheme of how marketing is done and how that relates to content, how that relates to your role. So this talk is really about congealing everything under that shared North Star so developers can understand the developer marketers and how that fits in with developer relations, etc. And it's all centered on this loop where the pursuit of knowledge leads to mastery, and that leads to competency and advocacy, which accelerates the adoption, which spreads the knowledge and creates that feedback loop. So if you'll indulge me today, I'd like to get a little meta and share kind of my recipe, my approach for how to produce effective technical content that can scale, allowing you to reach and teach developers. And these are just my thoughts, things that have worked for me. So I invite you to try them on in your own way, in your own organizations, and on your own projects to see what works for you. And for me, it all starts with respecting the people we're trying to reach and teach, respecting the developers. As we know, as developers, we're constantly navigating a sea of new, seemingly endless tools and options. We've got new tools, new toys, and potential treasures sometimes to pursue. But of course, we have limited time and limited attention. So if someone is going to invite us into their world, whether it's a new plugin, or it's a new framework, or it's a new SaaS product, they really ought to be adding value and improving that fairly quickly. Now, when it comes to learning, a fairly recent study back in 2023, it uncovered something that we probably intuitively already knew about ourselves and how we learn as developers. But when it comes to learning something new as a developer, there's 4 stages that it breaks down into. There's the exploration stage. This is where developers are searching for resources, they're discovering relevant documentation. This leads into the understanding phase, where you begin comprehending the content to grasp those concepts, and then you begin to put them into practice. You're applying the knowledge into hands-on scenarios, And finally, that leads into application, where you're integrating those learned skills into your real-world projects and solving real problems with them. So how do we create a path for developers that really hits all of these points and leads them from exploration to application? So there's a lot to unpack here, but what has helped me simplify things over the years has been to reference the idea behind Joseph Campbell's hero journey. Is anyone here familiar with the classic hero journey as a narrative arc? Few of you. Can anyone name maybe a popular movie or play or book that incorporates the hero's journey? Star Wars, exactly. Cool. So it's essentially, if you think about Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, things like that, it's following a universal storytelling pattern where the hero, they essentially receive a call to adventure from their ordinary world. They leave that comfort zone. They face challenges and adversity along the way, but they eventually have a breakthrough, and they can have a transformation where they go back home and share what they learned and benefit their community. And I think that this really maps well onto the learning journey as a developer period, and that's what we're going to uncover here. So like I said, every hero's journey begins in their ordinary world. In The Lord of the Rings, that's Frodo in the Shire. He's unaware of the adventure awaiting him. Similarly, with developers, we're using our familiar tools, we have our familiar routines, unaware maybe of the existence of new products or plugins, et cetera, that can help alleviate and unlock some potential in our lives. Then comes the call to adventure. So like Harry Potter receiving his Hogwarts letter, the developer encounters the potential magic of the project. But ultimately, there's the hesitation, the refusal of the call in the classic hero's journey. And for developers, this is the moment of doubt. We're not sure whether the tool is worth our time and investment. But along comes the mentor. This is the supportive guide. This is Gandalf. This is Dumbledore. It's Rafiki in The Lion King, offering wisdom, tools, and support. And in my paradigm, an effective content strategy essentially plays the role of the mentor. It allows you to provide the tutorials, the documentation, and the overall support that empowers people to take all those steps and move forward with confidence. So eventually, the hero, they face a choice. Do they stay in place, or do they cross the threshold and leave the matrix? Do they move beyond uncertainty and fully commit to the path? Once they cross that threshold, they enter the innermost cave. This is where they put the theory into practice. They sharpen their sword. They prepare for battle. And finally, their practice pays off as they reach their transformative breakthrough, able to apply that newfound mastery to their own big challenges in their life. And naturally, when we encounter things that bring more ease and productivity to our lives, we want to share that with the people we care about and the people around us. So that's how we complete the circle, where we return to the community with the elixir, so to speak, and share what we've learned. And therefore, we're advocating essentially on behalf of the tool, the project, the SaaS product, et cetera, that has helped get us to where we are. So with this mental model in place, I'd like to explore each of these steps in a little more detail, and along the way share some of my best practices that I've learned with creating developer content at scale. And I think a lot of it can be replicated and remixed into your own workflows and put into practice to meet your goals. So let's start back at step one. Remember, for us developers, our ordinary world is usually one filled with suboptimal workflows, productivity gaps, recurring issues, and we're constantly in search for improvement, more ease in our lives, more efficiency. So as someone who's aiming to help developers, the trick is to empathize with the needs of that developer. And the better that you understand their pain points, the better you understand how you can be of help and of service to them. This enables you to meet them where they are in their ordinary world and give them that call to adventure. This is a compelling invitation to explore a better world and a better way forward, but first you have to get their attention, of course. So by creating content that addresses the developer's needs and their pain points, you essentially become the solution to their problem, the answers to their questions, and the more immediate value that you provide to them up front, the quicker that you gain their respect and their trust. And of course, as we know developers, we trust our peers and our social groups more than we're going to trust brands. We're very sensitive to being marketed to. So if you're wanting to make an impact within a developer space, you're going to want to invest in building a really authentic, organic community around what you're offering. And that means organic presence across platforms, whether that's YouTube, X, Discord, etc., and allowing developers to have that space where they can share information, ideas, and in ways advocate on your behalf where you're not constantly hard selling and linking out to your services. This can also entail things like organizing webinars, live demos, hackathons, ways that people can have some real-time personal experience with your product, with your team, with you. And consider placing yourself in spaces where developers are already spending time. This is like tech newsletters, podcasts, forums, YouTube, and of course, conferences like this one. But regardless of how they receive your call to adventure, the goal here is to resonate deeply with their current struggles and clearly present a path worth exploring. But of course, every classic hero hesitates before pursuing that path to adventure. So your job is really to pave that yellow brick road that smooths out the friction. As Eduardo rightfully brought up yesterday in this quote here, to summarize it, if we create resistance, we fail. If we create ease and produce more of that ease, then we are succeeding. And that is everything from UI to also the developer education experience as well. So if your site fails to communicate why your product is worth the developer's attention, this leads to resistance and hesitation. And a problem I see often is when companies are so close to their offerings, they're so in the weeds of it, that sometimes they might explain it in jargon that only those already in the know are going to understand. But you might just be speaking Latin to your would-be users, so you want to make sure your message is very clear. And a strong call to action is a strong value proposition, clear enough that even a non-technical person could explain the why behind what you're offering, because after all, that non-technical person might actually be the first person who's investigating whether your tool is worth the investment of the team. So effective CTAs are crucial for paving a clear path forward, because they represent, in the hero's journey, literal calls to adventure. So you'll need to map out what the first step you want your users to take and be intentional with how you're guiding them forward. So whether that's watching an explainer video on your homepage, maybe they're starting a free trial or exploring your documentation, these CTAs need to be unambiguous and relevant to those stages of the developer's journey, not maybe throwing them straight into the depths of the docs without first showing them an intro video so you can have a high-level context of the why before getting into the weeds of the how and whatnot. So if your site is confusing, if your docs are hard to follow, developers are going to be more likely to abandon the journey before they even start it. And I've found that the absence of video tutorials can further alienate those who are visual learners and prefer learning through video. And this brings us to the stage of the mentor. So as I mentioned, every hero's journey includes that mentor, that sage guide that is providing the necessary support, the resources, and that perspective that really fuels them down the path towards transformation. And it's important to remember that content is not just like an accessory to your product. It really is integral to your product. It's your way to mentor people, as I've been saying, but it's also the vehicle through which people are engaging with you, both on your native platforms or out on other platforms like X, etc. So a content strategy that mentors can help convert those who are curious into the convinced, those who are dabbling into those who are doing. So if you have a website, that site is content. Done right, it can guide your users towards successful adoption. And an explainer video can quickly communicate how your product can make a difference in developers' lives. In my experience producing kind of why videos, why VueJS, why Bulma for their documentation sites, we found that that is really effective. The site visitors who watch the video, they stay on the page longer, they view more pages of the docs, and they spend more time on the site overall. So in other words, these high-quality pieces of content that help get people into the flow of what you're offering can make users more engaged and more likely to continue to pursue down that path of adoption. And as we know, solid documentation is crucial for success, so your docs should be easy to navigate with a clear structure. And you want to think of them as, in the hero's journey, their map, their survival guide, and their cookbook all in one. So ask yourself, what do they need to succeed, and really, what am I packing in their survival kit? Offering a getting started tutorial is often one of the best ways to make that learning journey more accessible and to accelerate adoption early on. And while it may be tempting just to do a text-based tutorial, and those can be effective as is, the majority of developers these days do rely on video content. The majority of people, period, rely on video content when learning new things, whether they're learning how to cook something or fix their car. We're constantly consuming video for learning, and the younger the person is, the more true that is for that person. But I do get it. Creating high-quality video content is not really for the faint of heart. It can feel intimidating. So what actually makes technical content effective? Effective content is engaging content. So you want to start, when you're producing it, with clean code. You want to nail down the technical details, and you want to teach it in a well-scoped, relatable example that translates into a written tutorial that walks through the code step by step. The two biggest pitfalls I see when I look at technical content that isn't quite as effective is they're making the mistake of assuming prior knowledge. You don't want to assume the prerequisite knowledge within your learner. You want to set that context for them. And there's also the pitfall that people fall into where they explain the how. I call this like the repeat after me content. It's like, here's how you do X, Y, Z. Here's X, here's Y, here's Z. Voila, here's a thing. But you didn't embed the why in the how, and therefore you didn't teach the developer to fish. You just threw them a pre-cooked fish, and then they can't apply that and adapt that learning into their own personal use case. So once your written tutorial is nailed down, my recommendation is you use that as your video script. This comes with the added benefit of not only do you know exactly what you're going to be saying in terms of your video, but you can also still publish that script as an article, as a blog post, and get the added SEO benefits that come along with that as well. Now, when it comes to video content, it should go without saying that quality audio is crucial. If your audio is difficult to listen to, viewers are going to drop off very fast. The same goes for high definition. You want things to be crisp, clean, and accessible, viewable even on an iPhone. While I'm sure all of you have beautiful text editors that are set up to your personal preferences and specs, when it comes to creating content, you kind of want to throw that out the window and think about accessibility. Maybe you like a 10-point font. I would recommend something closer to a 14 or 16-point font when you're filming something with high contrast as well, without things that are going to basically maybe pop up and autocomplete, and really strip that down to an accessible way of consuming the code that you're essentially going to be filming and presenting. Good quality audio-visual means you would need to invest into some equipment, like a quality mic, maybe some lighting and a camera if you're going to be on screen. But I know that that's maybe not possible or make sense for everyone, especially when they're getting started. So there are some alternatives that kind of just came to fruition in the past couple of years, and that is to use AI services. Daniel mentioned 11 Labs yesterday. That's a really high quality, you could use that to take your script, put it into that, and then have a fully narrated video. That cuts down on your recording and also your editing of that. There's also AI avatars with HeyGen and Synesthesia, et cetera. And these, they're getting better. Sometimes they can have an uncanny valley feeling, but they're digital avatars that can present for you. Maybe you are camera shy, maybe you have a really heavy accent that you're working on and think that your content would be less accessible if you use your voice, et cetera. There are ways to experiment with AI generation of audio and presentation that are new and interesting, and like I said, improving over time. Now, regardless of how you choose to present the content, you're going to want to clearly demonstrate the code that is involved. This entails creating really well-structured screencasts that are concise, that are clean, and that really cut the fluff. Because again, developers have limited time, limited attention span amongst all the tasks that they're focused on, so you really want to be respecting that resource as a finite resource that it is. So some high-level editing basics that I want to share with you. You essentially want to clean up your recording so that there's no distractions. You can cut out your pauses, your mistakes, your repeats, your filler words, and anything like visually distracting. Maybe there's a pop-up, maybe there's a lot of like mouse movement that's unnecessary. You can clip those out. I always aim for the cleanest, distraction-free flow of a screencast as possible. Here's me kind of just demonstrating cutting out the fluff there. And then you essentially end up with a clean, minimal edit, and this allows us to treat the attention that the developers are giving us with care. So to ease the editing process, you can also incorporate some AI to automate. There's Capwing and Jump Cutter that offer some free tiers that can make this a little bit easier for you if editing isn't your strong suit or something that you've even tried before. It's also very critical that, and this is another kind of red flag thing I see in content, that what you're showing matches what you're saying. So that might involve removing some frames or adding frames so that the narration perfectly aligns with what you're showing. Because it can be very confusing if you're talking about something, but we're not yet seeing it, or we just saw it, and we're like, wait, what are you talking about? So aligning the narration to the visuals is key. So here I'm just showing adding or removing frames to match that. Now, one of my favorite things to do, and what video allows me to have the opportunity to do, and also the responsibility to do, is to direct the viewer's attention around the screen as needed, and in a way that is going to help them facilitate that learning. So we can achieve this in multiple ways, such as with motion and outlines, as we see here. Or even better yet, we can tell them exactly where to look by narrowing focus and honing in on and isolating pieces of code so that we remove all distractions. Just say, hey, look at this. There's nowhere else to look but here. We can also do zoom-ins and zoom-outs on what's important. Traditionally, I use, and my team uses ScreenFlow to accomplish this, and it works very well for this, but there are a few options you can use, including Camtasia and even Screen Studio, again, that use some AI, such as like cursor tracking to help automate some of the aspects of getting well-edited and well-guided screencast on the output. You can make things even clearer in your screencast by adding annotations to explain what you're showing. And this is going to already improve code clarity, but you can go the extra mile by animating theoretical concepts as well. Personally, I use Apple Keynote for my animations, but the fundamentals for animation are pretty universal. Many of you probably have tried some animation libraries, and it all boils down to for my workflow that I recommend is you gather some icons, whether subscribing to an icon library or maybe making your own through an image generation pipeline with AI. But essentially, you're bringing these concepts to life with these icons with animated motion. So it can get complex, but the fundamentals, like I said, are very simple and universal. Every animation is going to have a built-in. How does the object enter the view, the screen? It also has the action or the behavior it takes when it's on the screen. Here we're just moving the position of the object. And then how does it or does it leave the screen? And so if we tack these on, if we layer them, if we add delays, we can get pretty complex outcomes. One that has been my favorite to produce, let's kind of let it play here. This was back in the day when I was teaching VueJS, showing how the component speaks with the actions that goes into the mutations, which affect state changes, and showing how the getters are working to pull just the state that we need. So this was a fun way for me to kind of show this concept in motion, to make it less abstract and say, let me stop trying to describe what's happening. Let me try to show you what's happening. And these are the kind of things that you can do. That was all what you saw happening real time in Apple Keynote. So I didn't have to use After Effects or any animation software other than the presentation software I'm already using. You might be thinking that, well, my brain doesn't think abstractly, visually like this, so how am I supposed to come up with the ideas to take concepts and demonstrate them visually? I guarantee if you put your script for your video into ChatGPT or what have you, ask it to generate some maybe visual analogies, visual metaphors for what you're teaching, you're going to come out with something that you can work with and animate accordingly. So I want to also reiterate, I showed you something complex, but animation doesn't have to be complex. You can simply do things like animating lists. And you might be thinking, Adam, why would I animate a list? Well, for me, it's an anti-pattern not to animate your lists bullet by bullet. Because if I show all of my points at once, what's happening right now is, especially if I pause, a few of you are basically already done reading this, and I haven't even gotten to the end. So it creates a separation of your focus and my delivery of messaging. Whereas if I show them point by point, if I'm only showing what I'm actually talking about, I retain the focus on what I'm saying. I keep my audience from wandering off alone, because we're supposed to be in this together. Another common use case to animate code is to retain context. So instead of going from one version of code and then flashing the new version, you can use some animation to smooth that out and to retain that context. So you can go from here to a smooth way that you're blending from there to the new state. That's something I really like to do, again, to show how things are transforming, how things are being added, removed, etc., versus just flashing new things and having the cognitive burden being placed on your learner about, wait, what just happened? Let me just show you how it's happening in real time. Speaking of facilitating the learning, for the first time ever, we now have the opportunity to provide personalized support to our audience with custom chatbots powered by AI that are trained on our products, trained on our docs, on our FAQs, on our support docs. And you can consider implementing a chatbot mentor. You can do this with something like Intercom, Zendesk, Command AI also has them, or you could roll your own with maybe a custom GPT using OpenAI. An example of a company that is making good use of this tactic already is Render, the deployment solution. If you go onto their docs, there's this Ask AI button. You click it. I'm just asking, how do I set this up with Vue? And I'm getting custom real-time help and guidance and mentorship from the docs themselves with this AI agent. I think that's a really novel use case that's going to be pretty transformative, and I think a lot of companies should start to implement that in their docs very quickly. With all this content-driven support, going back to the kind of lineage of the hero's journey arc, they gain the confidence to cross the threshold and dedicate the time to mastering their craft. They deepen their discovery as they approach their inmost cave. They put their concepts into practice, preparing to defeat the boss. And as they are preparing, they'll need further mentorship and content, troubleshooting and integration guides, advanced tutorials, cookbooks, support from your team, community, and maybe AI mentor. This all culminates in the explorer finally becoming the hero of their story, reaching mastery over their challenges, and empowered and transformed, having reached their potential, they can now complete that circle and become the mentor because they've discovered the Holy Grail, attained the Master Sword, and they can return to their community with the elixir, and your hero essentially has become the advocate as they spread the knowledge about what you've been able to help them achieve to their developer community. So I hope sharing a bit of my perspective helps you gain a little more clarity on what it takes to create effective developer content, maybe how your role might be able to support that in your organization, or just get a better sense for what are those DevRel people on your team really up to. If you're inspired to get more impact out of your content, I do want to let you know that I offer these services via a consultancy. You can scan that code if you want to learn more, and we can talk about maybe it being a good fit for me taking a look at your content strategy, creating a content engine around scalable content that is effective for for developers adopting your technology. So with that, I hope you have a good rest of your conference. I hope some of you, I can meet more of you in the after party, and thank you for your time and attention. I do not take it for granted. Thanks.